welcome to so many newcomers today. Really nice to have you all here. And some old comers we haven't seen in a while. Welcome back to Venerable Kumshi. Nice to see you again. She's been visiting her home. We have been attempting, in between weather scares, to have this opening series of Dharma talks on the 4 Dharma seals. And a couple of weeks ago, Don Shushu gave a talk on the first of those Dharma seals, impermanence, or anicca, as it's called in the Pali language. I'm going to skip ahead to the 4th one. I suppose there's a purpose to this order, but it's Nirvana, which is basically stated as Nirvana is peace, or Nirvana is beyond extremes. A basic definition of the word is unbinding or extinguishing, freedom from cyclic existence, that round of rebirths in which we get caught due to our craving and our clinging to our preferences and our ego, our identity, self-identity. The Buddha himself warned his disciples not to concern themselves too much with nirvana because he told them it's beyond human conceptual understanding. So there's not much point in pondering it or wondering how I'm going to get there, within the next 3 months or something like that. It's just, it doesn't work that way. Another way of thinking of nirvana is that it's a state of non-dualism or unity. And as one of the 4 Dharma seals, it's one of those key tenets or principles of Buddhism. I'm going to talk today drawing on both the early or Theravadan Buddhist teachings on nirvana, particularly as given to us by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, the great translator of the Pali Canon. And then I'll also turn to the Mahayana view, and so talk about it from the 2 different perspectives. I think this story has probably been told here before, but I read it again in Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's, one of his essays. It's a story that illustrates the error of thinking of nirvana as nothingness, which I remember when I was a schoolgirl, sort of hearing about the word nirvana, and my religious teachers said, sort of described it as a state of nothingness, or because it's often described, or more easily described as stating what it's not rather than what it is. So this story talks about that and illustrates it. There was once a turtle who lived in a lake with, obviously, fish for companions. And one day the turtle went out on dry land for a walk. And he was away from the lake for several weeks, and when he returned, the fish greeted him and said, you've been away for a while, where have you been? And the turtle answered, well, I've been up on dry land, spending time there. And the fish looked at him puzzled and said, what are you talking about? What is this dry land? So the turtle paused and tried to think of a way to explain something that had absolutely no parallels in their ordinary underwater world. The fish tried to help by prompting the turtle, saying, first, is it wet? And the turtle said, no, it's not wet. And the fish continued, is it cool and refreshing? No, it's not really cool and refreshing. And does it have waves and ripples? No, there's no waves and ripples. So they got kind of worried, and they finally said, well, can you swim in it? And no, you can't swim in it, the turtle said. So naturally the fish reasoned, well, if it's not wet, not cool, not wavy, and you can't swim in it, well, this dry land of yours must be complete nothingness, or just a fairy tale or annihilation. It just doesn't make sense. And the turtle had to simply smile and say, well, that may be. That may be. And went for a walk, another walk on dry land. So regarding the question of nirvana, the nature of nirvana, the question's often asked, does it merely signify the end of suffering? That is it only the extinction of mental defilements and liberation from samsara? Or does it signify some reality existing in itself? And nirvana is more than just the destruction of defilements and the end of samsara. It is a reality transcending the entire world of mundane experience. A reality that transcends all realms of phenomenal existence. So how can we know this? The Buddha makes several statements in his teachings to this. He refers to nirvana first as a dharma, or in Pali, Dhamma, which is an independently existing reality or a phenomenon, and we don't capitalize it to distinguish it from the Buddha's Dharma or teachings. For example, he says, of all dharmas, conditioned or unconditioned, the most excellent dharma, the supreme dharma, is nirvana. However, the unconditioned dharma is not produced by causes and conditions. It has the opposite characteristics from the conditioned. It has no arising, no falling away, and undergoes no transformation. Nevertheless, it is an actuality. The Buddha refers to nirvana as an unconditioned dharma. The Buddha also refers to nirvana as an ayatana. This means base, realm, plane, or sphere. But it's a sphere where there is not anything at all that corresponds to our mundane experience. And this is why it's often described in terms of negations, as in the story of the turtle and the fish. But that does not make it nothingness. And yet this is exactly how many well-meaning and sincere people interpret what cannot be conceived of in familiar and tangible terms. The Buddha also refers to nirvana as a dhatu, or element. It is the deathless element, amata dhatu. He compares the element of nirvana to an ocean. Just as the great ocean remains at the same level no matter how much water pours into it, without increasing or decreasing, so the nirvana element remains the same no matter how many or how few people attain nirvana. Obviously, the Buddha did not know about global warming and the melting of the polar ice caps. But the Buddha also speaks of nirvana as as something that can be experienced by the body, an experience so vivid and powerful that it can be described as touching the deathless element with one's own body. The Buddha also refers to nirvana as a state, pada. He calls it the amata pada, the deathless state, and the achyuta pada, the imperishable state. Another word used by the Buddha to refer to nirvana is satcha, which means truth, an existing reality. Nirvana as truth means it is a reality that the noble ones, that is, those who have entered upon the stages of enlightenment, beginning with stream entry, that these have directly experienced. All of these terms taken together clearly establish that nirvana is an actual reality. It's not merely the destruction of mental defilements, the end of suffering, or the cessation of illusory existence in samsara. Now you could ask a question, kind of a trick question. If nirvana is attained by the practice of the path, doesn't this make it something conditioned? Something produced by the path? In other words, doesn't nirvana become an effect of a cause? Literally the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. Here we have to distinguish, though, between nirvana itself and the attainment of nirvana. By practicing the path, one does not bring nirvana into existence. Rather, one discovers something already existing, something that was always present. The Buddha explains that just as the water of a river plunges into the ocean and merges with the ocean, so the spiritual path, the Noble Eightfold Path, plunges into nirvana and merges with nirvana. So now turning to the Mahayana view, I'll be drawing on what I found to be a wonderful book by Dainin Katagiri Roshi, titled Each Moment is the Universe. And this is his commentary on the 13th century Zen master Dogen Zenji's teachings. He has a big teaching, a book called the I'm going to mispronounce it, I've forgotten, but this particular chapter, anyway, this particular chapter that his book is based on is called Being Time. It's a very abstruse book. I've tried to read it, and it's pretty difficult. Katagiri Roshi does a really wonderful job, I think, of bringing it to life, and he also, besides what I realized in reading his book is that it's hard to talk about one Dharma seal like Nirvana without talking about others as well. And in particular, in this case, it's going to be impermanence. So, impermanence, which we call anicca in Pali, is seeing time in the proper way, seeing the true nature of time. And seeing impermanence is also to see myself as I really am, with joyful, open eyes. Because we think of nirvana as the opposite of samsara, we might begin our inquiry with asking, how does samsara come about? Dogen Zenji said that most people are not able to acquire the way-seeking mind of spiritual awareness without deeply understanding that a day consists of 6,400,099,180 moments. Wrap your little minds around that number. Moment is called kasana in Sanskrit. It's said that one finger snap, I can't snap my fingers, but you know, one finger snap has 60 moments, or 60 kasana. Another way of expressing it is that a moment is 1/75th of a second. And I'm not making all this up, it comes from the Abhidharma scriptures, which say that a moment equals 65 instants. So I think these numbers are meant to give us an idea of how quickly time passes, or we might think of it as the rate of impermanence. According to Buddha's teaching, all beings in the universe appear and disappear in one of these moments. But in day-to-day life, our rational minds are too slow to perceive the true rate of impermanence. Therefore, we sense a gap between ourself and time. And in that gap, our sense of self congeals, as it were. It becomes solid and something we cling to. And sensing that gap is also the origin of suffering. The tension and stress of sensing this gap between the true nature of time and our minds sets up in us the urge to escape, or to distract ourselves with with material things, with pleasures. Each one of us has our own list of things we use to escape, to distract ourselves. Television, shopping, food, sex, gambling, smoking, drinking. The list goes on and on. We depend on these things and we distract ourselves with them. We distract ourselves rather than developing the way-seeking mind, which Nagarjuna described as the mind that sees into the flux of rising and decaying and recognizes the transient nature of the world. Katagiri Roshi says, in fact, there is no gap between our minds and time or impermanence. Even though our minds can't keep up with the quick changes of time, we do exist along with everything else in this domain of impermanence. But as humans, we have the unique capability of realizing this truth and experiencing our changing life with joy and equanimity. To do this, to experience this joy and equanimity, we practice looking at ourselves with a calm mind. Through meditation in tranquility, we can catch up with the true nature of time, the true tempo of impermanence, and see deeply into what it is to be human. And thereby we develop the way-seeking mind. By making our body and mind calm in meditation, we can know ourselves as we really are, and society as it really is, and live comfortably in the transient reality of a moment. When we look at this reality with this way-seeking mind, it can be very difficult because we see our life being constantly cut off. There's nothing for our mind to cling to. We might begin to sense a meaninglessness because we cannot understand the impermanence with our slow, rational mind. And in fact, impermanence is beyond the concepts of meaningful or meaningless. And we have to learn how to live while looking this impermanence right in the face. Dogen's and Katagiri's teachings say that there are two aspects of time. One separates me from others. This is the human world, or samsara. The other aspect connects me to others. And this connection permeates every part of the universe, where everyone and everything exists together in peace and harmony. This is Nirvana. These two aspects of time, Dogen teaches, separation and connection, express emptiness, the interconnection or unification of opposites. Only by realizing these two aspects through our way-seeking mind can we know true security, the spiritual security we call Nirvana. Living with this naked nature of time, or impermanence, means that we cannot project any expectations. We learn to discount our preferences and expectations because we see that by the time our mind comes up with them, the moment is already gone. Zen masters always say, don't expect enlightenment, just sit. But we always want to know how our practice is doing. We want results. But this is just another form of escape from the moment, from looking impermanence right in the face. Katagiri describes this as blinking. And this is when we have to really watch ourselves, when we realize we're blinking, trying to escape. We see how our resistance, our impatience, our turning away from practice is an attempt to distract ourselves from this gap, from this living in the moment. So it really is important to sit and to practice without expectation of results. We only have to be wholehearted in our practice, our effort, breathing. Katagiri says, that's enough. Just to follow this practice is to live a significant life. We have to realize that meditation does not give us something. It's the opposite. Meditation shows us things about ourselves we never noticed before. Maybe things we didn't want to see. Things we've hidden under layers of what he calls decoration. When we've removed all the layers and there's nothing left to take off, then there's nothing separating us from other beings. At that point, we become so transparent that we are one with time, one with impermanence. But although we may be one with it spiritually, impermanence is too close to us for us to know it intellectually. This doesn't stop us from constantly trying to know. And when we cannot know, we experience suffering. The Sanskrit word for suffering is dukkha, sometimes translated as unsatisfactoriness. It's a kind of thirsty desire, driving me to approach something in greed or to avoid something out of hatred. In the deep sense, dukkha is emptiness. There is nothing to satisfy you. At the bottom of suffering is the transient nature of reality itself. This is why dukkha is the first of the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Dogen and Katagiri explain that at the bottom of suffering is time. Our ordinary minds, as I said, cannot keep up with the quick changes of time. So we feel this gap between ourselves and time, ourselves and everything else in the universe. And this is a misunderstanding which we call ignorance. It's a misunderstanding because there really is no separation, no gap. Everything is interconnected. But because of ignorance, we experience ourselves as separate and feel dissatisfaction. And to relieve that dissatisfaction, we're always seeking relief outside of ourselves. This is craving and clinging, or the second of the Four Noble Truths, the cause of suffering, or dukkha. So I'm just going to conclude by saying that when we chant the Heart Sutra, which we will do in a few moments, we encounter a very poetic expression of the attainment of nirvana in a Sanskrit mantra called the Prajnaparamita mantra. It's at the very end of the Heart Sutra. And in Sanskrit it's gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi svaha. And that is translated in this way as gone, gone, gone beyond, gone altogether beyond. Oh, what an awakening. So it is. Thank you very much for your attention. May all beings be free from suffering. May they be happy and well. May we all see into our true natures and develop the stability and the courage to look into the true nature of time and impermanence, and thereby realize